Welcome to the Asset Leadership Network's ALN Thursday at 4. My name is Mike Bordenaro. I am the Communications Director for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm very happy today to have Tim Ingram join us all the way from the UK today. We'll be talking with Jim about the ISO 55000 work that's being done right now and other things. Also, I'd like to start off by thanking our patron sponsors, ABS Quality Evaluations and Onuma System, and our organizational members. And we're very happy to have University Health join us as an organizational member. University Health is the first hospital in the world to be certified in ISO 55001, and it's quite the honor that they've joined us. And this is our second week with Life Cycle Engineering, so welcome to those new members. And if you have any questions, please. Oh, I wasn't sharing my screen. Sorry, folks. I was showing the slides very well, but you'll see them at the end of the half hour. And then if you have questions, there is a chat section and a question and answer section down at the bottom. You can ask questions that way. So Jim Dieter, CEO of the ALN, will now take over. Thanks, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And welcome, Tim. It's good to have you on today.
Hello, Jim. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So where are you calling from today?
So Warrington, it's in northern part of the UK, just right in between Liverpool and Manchester. Bit of a grim day today, but it's a nice part of the world normally. How about yourself, Jim? Where are you?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, whereabouts are you at the moment, Jim?
I'm in my home office in Vienna, Virginia, just near Tyson's Corner, and 20 minutes from DC. So a good place to be. And it's a sunny, beautiful day here. We've had some days in the 70s Fahrenheit, so and maybe even down to 20 or so Celsius. So nice. So Tim, we usually start off with an origin story. How'd you get into asset management, or how'd you get here today? And
okay,
how did it happen?
Yeah. So I've been quite lucky. I've had quite a varied background across a lot of different sectors, from oil and gas to research. Like I was lucky enough to work on Square Kilometre Array, which is world's largest radio telescope, which is being built at the moment, to various nuclear applications, normal production, lots of defence, just basically anything that's high risk sector I've been lucky enough to get involved with. I seem to always go back to one pivotal point in my career when I think about sort of an origin story or something like that. And it was in my first proper job. I used to work up at Sellafield, which up in the north of England. It's a nuclear facility, quite a big one, especially by UK standards. About 10,000 people sort of work there at any one time. It's a big place. And it was the world's first ever production nuclear power plant. It was remnants of the Cold War. It had nuclear processing facilities in terms of reprocessing fuel. We also used to make new nuclear fuel, sort of quite fast burning, so a combination of uranium and plutonium, mixed oxide fuel. And part of my career was spent on part of the production lines. And I got quite a bit of responsibility quite early on in my career. And I was what was called a system engineer at the time, and it was, here are a series of systems, they're yours, and you manage them. You're looking sort of 5, 10, 25 years ahead. It's something you'd probably nowadays call an asset manager in a lot of terms. We were looking at the time at implementing things like PAS 55. It was one of those sort of transitional points, and we had a piece of equipment that for a few different reasons was under quite a bit of scrutiny from the UK regulator, the Japanese regulator, Japanese customers, the UK government. And we decided to replace it because the maintenance times on it were quite poor. It's say replacing a cymbal belt would take 2 weeks. And we had aspirations that we get it down to about 5 minutes, something like that. And we succeeded in the end. The short version of the story is I managed to shut the plant down for 3 months in doing so, rather than the 2-week planned production time that it took, that it was planned to take. And what happened was that we had all the drawings, we had all the hardware. I'd been lucky enough to take it through sort of a graduate program and seen it through the design processes. It was a good piece of kit. And we came to install. We'd trained, in inverted commas, the operators and the maintainers. We'd upskilled everyone. We'd explained what was going on. But all there was hardware, a work pack with all the risk assessments and a set of drawings in real terms. And when it came to the installation, we'd ripped out all the old kit, just about put the new kit in, and this is in glove boxes. You're wearing respirators, you're wearing 3 pairs of gloves. It's really hard to operate, and you're trying to manufacture down to like sort of plus or minus 10 micron tolerances. And I got the flu. First day, we were just about to put the first piece of kit in, had my respirator on, and my boss looked at me and just said, "Get out. You look like you're about to pass out." I came back 2 weeks later, and there was a cascade of events that had started with the equipment being put in, something being the wrong size, someone then taking a piece out and machining it a little bit. Then one of the piece of product came in contact with the material. It just didn't really react in the way we ever expected. And then people tried to adjust it the way you used to adjust the old machine. And then people tried to do something else, and it went on to a 5-shift cycle. So it was just Chinese whispers from shift to shift to shift. And the reason I go back to that is I didn't realize at the time, but that was the moment that taught me that in order to operate, in order to maintain, in order to deliver an organization at any given point, it's so much more about all the things that are around the equipment, in some cases, than the actual equipment itself. And I was lucky enough then to move on to more defense orientated work, which was then undertaking things like systems engineering, requirements management, integrated logistics support analysis, ARM, RAM, which to me is all design side asset management. And if you get that right, you can hit the ground running with a set of information, a set of decisions, a set of logic that can really help you operate in an asset management way of thinking. So yeah, that probably is the bulk of my origin. And in terms of where we are with asset management now, that led me to a position where I was advising the UK nuclear regulator on what good looks like across UK nuclear fleet, at least. And then I've started supporting the likes of the International Atomic Energy Agency and developing some guidance with a group of 8 other people from around the world, which is really interesting, as well as supporting lots of other sectors around the world. But I think the nuclear stuff has probably been my my biggest crown to date, I think. So I don't know if that helps you a little bit.
Oh, no, that's a different story than we've heard from anybody before. That's a great story. Sometime we're going to put together a whole, like an hour video of just people's origin stories. I think would be interesting. But so I think I saw that report, from and let me get the acronym right. It's the IAEA, right? International Atomic Energy Agency.
I thought you were talking about when I broke the plant. There was a couple of those reports that came out, but
Oh, no.
but no, yeah. So the one with the International Atomic Energy Agency. So that's for reference, that's effectively the nuclear arm of the UN. So it reports into the UN Security Council. So it's you see people going in to do audits of various nuclear facilities around the world to check that nothing's gone missing. It's part of that organisation. So it's quite well placed and quite interlinked with the likes of the UN. And I must admit, the first time I arrived, I hadn't put 2 and 2 together. And I came to Vienna, and we had arrived at the convention centre. I just looked around and thought, something's a bit odd here. All the flags from all the way around the world in front of a big fountain. And something's not quite right. Walked into the canteen and just see the UN Sustainable Development Goals all over the wall. And then all of a sudden the penny drops where we were, and so it's the UN headquarters in Vienna, and it's very interesting experience.
Wow, yeah, nice. So how did you get involved in the UK Mirror Group, and that you're now the head of, right?
Yeah, so I chair it. Took over from David McEwen, who some people may know from the Institute of Asset Management. It was one of those, I think fortuitous events from my point of view. I was talking with Rhys Davies, who's the international chair, and we were talking about how to try and get involved. And just so happened there wasn't much nuclear representation on the UK committee at the time, so reached out and tried to help. And just as I joined the committee, David was stepping down, so I thought, well, why not? And it's been a really, really interesting couple of years trying to just see how this discipline has evolved. And I think it's a really pivotal time, because we're all the great groundwork that like yourselves have been part of in getting the standards where it is, and now that we're looking at it again, I think there's a real good chance to evolve and bring on the last decades of learning.
Yeah, I'd have to say, my opportunity to head the U.S. delegation for the development part was, it wasn't just a project I was involved in, it was a life experience, really, that, changed my understanding, outlook, and, professionally, and just, as you alluded to, the international aspect of it, of, the reality of dealing with people from all over the world, people speaking in different languages and trying to communicate, when I can barely get out a few words of German and a few words of Spanish, and we got people speaking in their third language and talking technical. It's, and then there's understanding the Brits, and it's like, that's really hard.
Good bit of sarcasm here and there, and we'll keep it going. But yeah, especially with the IEA work, that was my first proper experience in that environment, and it was really interesting to see, because we were focused on a sector. When you just look at the makeup of, say, nuclear power, the different dynamic as you move around the world and the different drivers, especially at the time when we were doing it, you've got Germany had just shut down its reactors for political reasons. You've got, say, Sweden, who were a very critical point where effectively they had a strike price for the electricity, and if their cost of generation went below that, that's it, they shut down the reactor. Oh, sorry, went above it. And then you've got the likes of Russia, where it was completely different. If they wanted to build one, they just built one. And China's in a big growth spurt at the moment, and you've got, say, the UK, where you're in this position where it's half regulated in terms of the power generation. It's half for the greater good, that we know that we need that base load of power in the UK that nuclear is providing at the time. So it's just really interesting, just looking at that one sector and the drivers that sat behind it, and then trying to see how that was impacted by things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and how the concept of nuclear operations could provide low carbon, and how it can connect and deliver some of those really big societal opportunities, and how asset management can help drive that, really.
Yeah. Are you seeing, are experiencing, the senior level decision maker, policy maker buy-in into asset management approaches?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. I think COVID's probably been quite an odd positive from an asset management sense. I think those facilities that have had asset management in place prior to sort of big black swan events like either Fukushima or COVID, they've recognized that change in stimulus in terms of the constraints of the ability to get people on site, it's actually enabled them to look across their asset base and say, hang on, what can we do? How do we leverage this? Well, we've got these huge assets of people, right? We need to understand how to support them correctly. But then when it comes down to the physical assets, which ones can we push the maintenance out a bit from what we'd like to do? Which ones can we not let slip? What extra performance can we bring out? Because potentially they're in a position where they need to create more power because of the plants are now in a different position. So those facilities that have actually managed to harness the power of asset management, and I'd say the best in class are the ones who can then say, yes, we've made these short-term decisions, but the long-term impact is X, and they understand the risk profile that they've now taken on. And I think it's something that by the International Atomic Energy Agency taken on board, if they're talking about asset management, then the local regulators take it on board. They then talk about asset management. And I mean, there's technical assessment guides in the UK which extol what good asset management looks like, and that the UK, they don't necessarily regulate against, but they're key principles that if They go to a site, they are looking for like proportionate effort across the life cycle. They're looking for risk-based practices. They're looking for auditability. They're looking for all the core things that are asset management. And if someone isn't compliant, they can then connect that to a license condition to kind of drive forward.
Wow. Yeah. We've been, Tim and I have both been on the ISO work group, TC 251 work group 4 calls, which are, a nice afternoon time in the UK, or at 7 a.m. in the US East Coast. And I'm like, I don't get up at 6 a.m. Yeah, I did that for many years. So that's a real challenge for me. And I've been leading an effort of the group, or facilitating, I guess is a better word, around the principles. And there was one of the example you gave it in your origin story about the part and then the implications it had. Somebody made a comment about criticality, and well, I know about criticality to some degree. I'm not a maintenance and reliability expert by any stretch, but Jenny and Tomasetti and Uberlytics, they built a whole business around that. That's very successful. But I never really got the connection of critical until this conversation. I never got the connection. It just didn't click in my head. The connection between criticality, sort of tying the operational part or the life cycle part of asset management, to the business drivers of asset management. And that's really what criticality is, right? It's like, what's really important to the organization? How do we achieve our goals? And it's, the assets that are critical are the ones that impact the organization's achieving its goals, maybe is a way to say that. Does that make any
absolutely.
sense to you?
No, it definitely does. And I think this is where I really like the integrated logistics support analysis type analyses, which can be done during the design phases. And looking at what they try to achieve, it's that understand the equipment before you even started to design it. What are you trying to achieve? Well, that's kind of fundamental asset management, isn't it? And if you can use asset management to help you fund those studies in the right places, you can get to a point where you've designed out a lot of the problems before they've got there. You understand your failure modes, you've done your FAMICAs as part of your design, but then you've taken it further. You understand the training, you understand the level of repair, you understand the choices you've made to get to the point that you're at. And the aspiration for me is always that when you've gone through commissioning and you're on your first day of operations, you've already got all that information there. The first time you go with your vibration sensor, whatever it might be, you've already got 3 points of data from the commissioning. So already I'm at 10. Well, it was 8 on the commissioning. Oh, something's already going wrong. I need to have a look keep an eye on that straight away rather than waiting 2 years to start to find a problem. And especially from a criticality sense, I know safety critical infrastructure especially, and nuclear is an easy one to pick up. Things like safety become they're a given. Things have to be safe, and they are traditionally safe, and there is a lot of really good stuff that goes on, but trying to balance the safety with performance. And Sellafield's a great example because it's a big ecosystem. You've got things that are being decommissioned, things that are processing the waste, things that are doing different jobs, really. So when you're looking at a local sense, you can look at a certain facility and say it's holding some high hazard waste. That facility has a degradation profile. That is a liability that is on your books that potentially could break and cause a big incident if you don't manage it correctly. And I'm not suggesting anyone does. They're managed really, really well. But that risk, when you then look at the next plant that's dealing with the waste, you could be in a position where you're trying to make a really efficient, really safe, brand new facility, trying to keep it as safe as possible. But if it takes you an extra 5 years to commission, extra 10 years to commission, that means you've put extra 5 or 10 years risk onto that upstream plant. So all of a sudden, when you look at the whole asset management for the whole site and understand your overall risk profile and what is value to you, what's important, what your criticality is, actually, it may not even be in the facility that you're in. It may be somewhere else. And actually, your risk bases and the safety cases you make might actually be predicated on, this might not be the safest way to do this, but it's a lot safer than that, a lot safer than that other plant failing. So yeah, criticality it's a really good place to start. And I think sometimes people get caught up in that hardware aspect. Sometimes if you stand back and look at your supply chain, look at the people, look at, have you ever read the Phoenix Project?
I don't think I have. No.
So it's a book about DevOps and applying DevOps in a manufacturing environment. And it's sort of Lean, Six Sigma, TPM type methodologies. And there's a guy in it who is, I think he's called Brent, if I remember rightly. And he's this IT guy, and they're trying to roll out some new applications. And he is the guy you go to. He is the one who will just fix everything quick snap. And when actually you stand back, as much as he is valued as the firefighter, as the person who'll get things done, he's actually one of the worst parts of the organization because he's the bottleneck. And if he ever gets run over by a bus, from a criticality perspective, you're in real trouble. And actually trying to break that and understand how you can distribute that value, how you can distribute that criticality and turn things into process is really valuable. But yeah, Phoenix Project, brilliant book.
Yeah, interesting. So what do you think the other industries can learn from the nuclear industry in terms of asset management? I mean, beyond criticality, we just talked about that. Anything else that you, or is that just it?
I think there's some interesting things around some of the connections that they've already tried to make, like we've mentioned, around to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, because it's quite a simple microcosm in some ways, because you can see how tangible and direct that power source is to satisfy some of those goals. But they come together as a body very, very well. So say post Fukushima, there was a number of improvements across all nuclear facilities across the world. And they rolled out improvements all over the place very, very quickly, very rapidly in nuclear terms anyway. And I think that community aspect is something that probably a lot of organizations can learn from. There's processes and standards such as in PO AP 913, which is very nuclear focused, but it's a consistent way of working which looks at criticality, but it also looks at the other things that you need in place. And it's trying to solve the 80% of the Pareto, where everyone can get that 80% of benefit for 20% of the effort by standardizing. And I think the other thing that I'd say in terms of learning is nuclear is in a very, very odd place, because the decisions that are made during design and most definitely through operations don't only impact the 50-year life of the plant, they potentially impact the 60 to 100-year decommissioning part of the plant as well. So decisions you're making today actually potentially have a huge impact further down the line. So when you're looking at like economic operations of the plant today, you may actually be incurring quite a big cost further down the line, and then that reputational damage of the sector by making something hard to decommission or hard to get rid of. And that's a position that some countries are finding themselves very much in at the moment, that there is a big legacy of nuclear waste that is slowly being processed, slowly being dealt with. But until that's dealt with, it's hard to process, hard for people to kind of get their head around, well, why should we build more? Because we're creating this legacy, when in reality, I forget the number, but it's somewhere in the 96 to 98%, I think, of fuel that goes into a reactor is reusable. So you can take it out, you can put it through some chemical process, and you can get it back and reprocess it again. But yeah, it's that community, especially, I think is really, really important.
I mean, I haven't had a few opportunities to come, have a little bit of involvement in the nuclear industry. Nothing like you, of course, but had a chance to visit the Savannah River site, and they're dealing with the nuclear waste, and what do you do with it? And to a large degree, they were still, really trying to figure out actually what to do with it. I didn't think about it at that time because I was very focused on personal property, but it is just a failure of asset management. I mean, you have an asset management plan, and talk about assets having positive or negative value. Well, that nuclear waste is an asset that has, once you extract all the positive value, remains and has a negative value, perhaps. And if you don't have a plan on what's going to happen to it, that's not a very good plan. You haven't thought through it.
No, it's not. And so if you had to stand back and look at the entire sort of nuclear life cycle, you have nuclear fuel, and say if 96, 98% is being recycled, you've then got a small amount which you can effectively boil down and turn into glass and vitrify, so it can't get into the water table. It's very stable state, but it's a very small amount. So for context, I haven't got anything the right size, but for someone to generate all the power they would need for their entire life, the waste is the size of a hockey puck. For context, so if you compare that to coal, to natural gas, the amount of waste that is produced, and I always like the facts. I know it's true in the UK. I'm not sure about anywhere else, but if you were to take a coal-fired plant and put it onto a UK nuclear site, it would break the level of uranium, I think it is, or cesium that gets let up the chimney. It would be above the level that would be allowed for a nuclear site, which is it's letting off more radiation than a nuclear plant, which is a very, very strange thing. But if you stand back and look at a government level or higher, the idea of that recycling and reprocessing fuel, if the fuel is your asset and you want to protect that for as long as you can, the decisions you would make as a government, if you had total control, may be very different to those that you'd make as a power generating facility and potentially storing waste underground rather than actually using it, reusing it, and trying to get the most from it. And I think that's quite a parallel which a lot of different sectors can probably maybe not learn from, but probably at least understand.
Yeah, it's I guess it reduces to a real simple idea, which is think it through. Have a plan. Look ahead. Don't cut corners. Around safety and all these other factors. You just hate to see it, as you mentioned earlier, when what gets hit in a cutback is the maintenance budget. As I guess it was Tom Smith mentioned in our meeting this week that for too long, as we all know, the practice has just been, if you're short of cash, just steal it from the maintenance budget, and everything's over-engineered, so you're not going to see the problem for a while. But then we end up with crumbling infrastructure and all the other related problems.
So a great example that one of my colleagues gave me a week ago, which I have abused ever since, is they were looking at some structures. So I sit within the transportation division of Atkins, and there's a structure being analysed and designed to reduce the amount of carbon that was in it. Quite a normal practice nowadays, I think. And someone stood back and said, "Hang on a minute. What we now need to do maintenance on the bridge. So through the life, we're going to have to put roadworks up." And then they looked at the amount of carbon that's going to be generated from the queues that will be caused during the maintenance periods, and it was 3 times greater than the amount of carbon that was saved in the bridge, let alone the maintenance costs and everything else. So, and I think that's a really good example of where asset management can help ask the right questions, stand back, trying to understand what you're trying to do, which is reduce carbon on the whole, not just in one specific place, or give one designer one objective to get something as low as they physically can.
Yeah. Mike, hi.
Hi, very fascinating, Tim. And we have 2 new members who I have some questions related to their work. But before we get to that, I want to actually share my screen and do what I should have done previously in thanking our everyone. And let's see, where do I go? Here we go. So, well, of course, thank you, Tim, for joining us. And here are our patron sponsors, ABS Quality Evaluations, ABS Group, Onuma Systems. Here are our organizational members. And a special shout out to ABS Quality Evaluations and ABS Group this month, who are the sponsors for this program. And ABS Quality Evaluations does certification to ISO 55001 and other standards, and the ABS Group, which is a separate entity, provides consulting, and they've just launched their ISO 55001 certification team, consulting team. Sorry, I got that mixed up. And just want to say that next week we have Carrie Heischman. We're on a ISO 55000 stretch here. We had Tom Smith, who's involved, has been involved in that, Tim, and then Carrie is, Jim, will you help me with her title at ISO?
She's assistant. I don't know. She has an official title. I'm not sure, but she's supporting Jack Dempsey, who is the convener of Worker 4 for TC.
No, for the ISO. For TC 251. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, pretty sure.
Okay. Now, Tim, so LCE quality evaluation, or LCE, which is Life Cycle Consulting Engineers, started off by, was founded by former U.S. nuclear sub workers. When they retired from the Navy, they ended up consulting back to the Navy about the subs. I don't know if you've been involved in that, but it brings up another issue of asset management, which is personality. In order to be working in a submarine, you've got to be a certain kind of person. Have you found that certain type of people are better at nuclear asset management than others? And how does that relate to other industries?
It's a really interesting point. I have been involved in sort of comparable programs, and I think, say, especially if you look to defence as a whole, not even just nuclear. There's you purposefully breed firefighters in defence, don't you? There's a problem, you figure out how to fix it there and then, and you get praised for it. That's kind of the absolute opposite of what you want from asset management. You want to get people to a place where it's a bit boring and they're thinking long term. And I think especially in nuclear, it's kind of the other way. You're in a position where you've got a lot of people where the safest thing quite often is do nothing. Shut down a reactor, pause, walk away, let's have a good long think and procrastinate around it. And actually you want to start taking some more reasonable actions. So things, for example, especially when it comes to safety critical systems, they tend to be quite shiny. They tend to be quite well looked after. But I've seen occurrences where you have a safety critical system and someone's looking up, yeah, over there, it's brilliant, yeah, it's great. And then there was an emergency and someone went up to that safety critical system to read an instrument, press a button, whatever it may be. And the stairwell on the way up collapsed because it had never been maintained. And that view of criticality and understanding, if you only ever look at the process drawings, you will only have one view of criticality. If you actually look at it from an asset management perspective, and look, any good reliability engineer, any good anyone good in that field should be able to stand back and see that bigger picture. But yeah, there's a real, personalities and culture is such a huge thing, and it's really hard to breed and change, isn't it? And especially when you're down into the subs kind of territory, there's a special breed. There's a special breed, and they're very good at what they do. And
I would have never thought that answer would have gone in that direction. And I think that points
Interesting.
Why Asset Leadership Network was formed, not the Asset Management Network. And I think it's from the leadership that should take that bigger picture view and look to see, hey, these stairs look wonky. We need to do something about that and understand the holistic picture. And maybe leadership is the place where culture can begin to change. We once had Admiral Allen, who was the commandant of the Coast Guard, and he said his method for changing the culture was to pull everyone through a very small hole, and the ones who did not make it through did not make it through. But yeah, anyway. Then another new member, University Health, brings up the idea of nuclear medicine. And I don't know if you're involved in that at all, but that's not something that's remote from us. That's something that's right there. And is there do you know about nuclear medicine asset management, or have you been involved in that at all?
Yeah, on the periphery. So when I reviewed the UK's sort of position on what good looks like in the asset management systems across the UK, it did extend out to all licensees. So that includes some of the nuclear health facilities, and it's all the same stuff. it's just got a bit more of a production line spin in reality, because it's more a process and kind of, as bad as it sounds, churning people through rather than just being focused on one single big asset that's a power plant.
That's good. It looks like we have a guest.
Okay.
So you say his name 3 times and he appears. Hello, David.
David's may not be available. He said if he was around, he would join us, and perhaps he joined his other call. David, your microphone is not on. Maybe I can turn it, but he said that he might not be able to join us, but since he was still there, I thought I'd give it a try.
Okay. Well, let me, Tim, there's something I wanted to follow up on, jumping back to the ISO topics is, as a leader of the UK Mirror Group, is there, what's your focus? I mean, what's the big picture outcome you're looking for from this? Is that something you can talk about and share?
It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure whether we can share. I don't quite know what the rules are around ISO, because it's that kind of closed knit, isn't it? And I mean, look, we
just
really
call it personal. Just call it personal. Then that's fine. I don't know.
Look, we're really lucky in the UK to have a lot of really good experts who have been around from the very beginning, like David, and I think there's a lot of work that people hope to get in the first revisions, but that work, as I understand it, of trying to get a common set of building blocks that everyone around the world bought into as a systematic way of approaching asset management that enabled the conversations of the last decade to take place, and people like myself to come on board and understand and be able to be part of. I think going back and revisiting part of that is a key focus, and making sure that we try and make the most, but also trying to see what has changed over those last 10 years, because I think asset management's now at a point where it's quite so much bigger than it was 10 years ago, and it now is possibly something different than what it was originally intended to be in some subtle ways. And there's different sectors taking it on board, different areas that had never been thought of to take it on. And I know from a personal angle, there's some real big societal issues out there at the moment. I think for me, things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they get bandied around a lot. I've mentioned them a few times on this call, but they encapsulate a lot of what the good of humanity should be heading towards. And as I see it, that's where governments need to play a big role. But governments don't necessarily fully understand how to leverage their supply chains, how to leverage their operational organizations in such a way that can actually generate value. So what I'm hoping to see in part of the 55,011 suite and potentially wherever the 55,000 document goes, seeing that recognition that asset management as a way of working can actually help in these big areas and set up organizations for success and get the thinking in the right place, so that you're actually fostering the right kind of questions, approaches. For me, that would be really brilliant success.
Yeah, well said. That's good. I like that. That's definitely a clip.
There's one thing that the Asset Leadership Network is doing, Tim. We've stood up the Advancing Equity with Asset Leadership Committee, and it takes a very simple stance that involving all relevant stakeholders, if you actually follow that directive, you're addressing equity immediately. And we think that once you get all the stakeholders involved, your mission might change when you're actually listening to everybody. So it gets back to the culture then of people being afraid of letting go of control in order for the greater good of society. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and look, it comes with its downside, doesn't it? And I think Jim can probably attest to this. I've probably seen a lot more of it than me on these international committees. But sometimes you must have heard the old adage, what is it? A horse designed by a committee is a camel. And I think sometimes there is a place to have all those voices, and it is really important, but also you need probably one person, two people with a guiding vision to at least set out a path that's consistent. And there's an analogy that I heard on a podcast a number of weeks ago, where if you go back to cave times, if you look at what success looked like for a group of 10, say, people in a cave, it may be going and getting to a water source. And maybe they're here, maybe the water source is here. Getting there is success. Now, you might have a couple of people who know that the straightest line is here, but maybe you've got the wider groups who want to go that way or this way and take a different route. Success back in those times was actually everyone staying together and actually starting to take some steps towards the right goal as a group, had a greater chance of success from predators, whatever it might be. So I think that's where we are as well, that as much as we need to listen to everyone, we also need to have one vision. We need to stay as a collective, and that will enable us to actually deliver. If we all fragment off trying to do our own little things, then we probably won't get anywhere.
Excellent. That's good.
Yeah, very good analogy.
Well, Mike, you have any other questions, or we don't want to keep too long today?
No, he's addressed everything really well. Thank you very much, Tim.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, just these calls every week are different, and there's just so many interesting, knowledgeable people to get to know in the world of asset management. It's been a pleasure for Mike and I, and for the ALN to host these. So thank you for all you do in asset management and with TC 251, and look forward to working with you going forward in those efforts.
Look forward to it, and yeah, thank you, and thank you for welcoming me so well into the committee. It's been a pleasure.
Good, great, thanks.
And thank you to all of our attendees this week who got a very interesting perspective on asset management from the UK.
All right. See you next week.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.